such a pleasure to be here and to tell you about a project that I have been working on for the last 7 years at Stanford, whose title is If Ben Franklin Had Facebook. But first, let's meet Franklin. Here he is on the left in a very, very famous painting made when he was almost 80 years old, at the point where he was the most famous American in the world. On the right is what happens when you Google Ben Franklin today. You can do this at home, you can do it right now, and you can see that we make Franklin in our own image. Anything that you are, Franklin can be that too. So if you are a zombie, you can be a Franklin zombie. So all of this is very nice, all of this is very fun. But for a historian like me, this creates what I call the Ben Franklin problem. And the Ben Franklin problem is that because that image is so famous to us, it's on the $100 bill, we see it so often, Ben Franklin is so familiar to us that we forget that he had to become Ben Franklin. So in our project, what we did was to recreate the social network of Ben Franklin, so that we could see him becoming the Ben Franklin that all of us know so well today. Ben Franklin sent over 20,000 letters over the course of his long life. He was born in 1706. He died in 1790. We analyzed a small portion of those letters, which I will tell you about in a moment. But first, I want to give you a little refresher course on the life of Ben Franklin. I know all of you took the Early American History Survey course at Stanford, and those of you who didn't have deeply regretted it ever since. Franklin was born in 1706, very poor, in Boston. He came to Philadelphia, which was the city of opportunity, and there he established himself as a printer. He made so much money as a printer that in 1748, he was able to retire as a gentleman. And in the 18th century, when you became a gentleman, you could become a scientist. And that's what Ben Franklin did. He began the electrical experiments in Philadelphia, flying the kite, the thing that we're all so familiar with. He sent letters about the electrical experiments to his patron in London. Those letters were published in 1751 in the book that you see here. This book made Franklin the most famous American in the world in print. So people knew about Franklin in 1751 as the author of a famous publication, but they did not know him in person. Our study begins directly after that moment. In 1757, Franklin left for London. He stayed there for nearly 20 years. London at that time was the capital of America. It was also the capital of the world. Britain was the largest empire in the history of the world to that time. So Franklin had gone to the epicenter of the world. And over that 18-year period, he sent and received 3,500 letters that began to establish him as the most famous American in the world, not just in text, but through social networks. We call these the London decades, the roughly 18-year period where he was there. So what did we find? Well, we found that over the course of that nearly 20-year period, Franklin every year began to send and receive more letters. On the left is 1756, the year before he left for London. On the right is 1775, the year he got back on a ship to America. Those of you who remember the Colonial American Survey course that you took at Stanford know that in 1775, he got on another ship to Paris, where he spent the next 10 years negotiating the commercial and political treaties that occurred during the American Revolution. We caught Franklin right before that time. So you can see in orange are letters from Franklin. In blue are letters coming to Franklin. Now you may be looking at this gradual increase in letters and saying to yourself, this is the most obvious thing that anyone has ever told me. Of course the number of letters sent and received went up. But until we had done this study, No one had ever thought to ask that question, because social networks and the way we think about social networks today have transformed the way we do history. And the availability of big data, big cultural data sets from ancient Egyptian papyri to the memo that you wrote yesterday are all being digitized. And at Stanford, in our digital humanities labs, we are able to process those cultural data sets in new ways. We then mapped his social network onto a map of the world. Now take a careful look at this. This is his social network, all letters sent and received in 1758, right after he got to London. Those of you who remember the Colonial American Survey course will be asking yourselves the very good question, why are there things going to Kansas City if there wasn't Kansas City at the time? Look at this, 1775, 18 years later. Look at the density and size of his network. It has gone up. It's thicker, it's richer, it's bigger. Look at this. On the top, Franklin's lifetime social network, all letters sent and received between 1706 and 1790. This is what big data can do for the humanities. It can allow us, for the first time, to draw comparisons. On the bottom is Voltaire, Ben Franklin's contemporary. We also mapped his social network, letters sent and received over the course of his life. Look at the difference. Franklin's crosses the Atlantic. Voltaire stays entirely in Europe. They're both really, really famous, but they're famous in different ways because their social networks bear the marks of confessional lines, of political lines, of imperial rivalries. And we can see those in ways that we weren't able to before. We can also ask new questions, like what's that orange line that crosses the Atlantic? Who is that person who is receiving a letter from Voltaire down in South America? What do we learn from Ben Franklin and the social networking that large cultural data sets allow us to do now? We can ask new questions. What are the earliest social networks in human history? The term social network was coined in the early 20th century, but surely there were social networks before that. We've seen Ben Franklin's, we know it's there. But before we have letters, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, do we have social networks? And how would we know? It's a great mystery. What if we looked at famous texts as social networks? All of those begats in the Bible, those are social networks. We, the people, in the Constitution, that's a social network. The Constitutional Convention was many things. It was a social network, too. We now have the capacity to map those social networks of the framers of the US Constitution. Social networks of individual people. You're never going to look at the Last Supper the same way again. The moment that Jesus unfriended Judas. Finally, you know, historians, we do events, right? We do wars, we do treaties. But we can now look at events as social networks. The Underground Railroad was nothing if not a social network. We can look at the Nazi rise to power as a social network in action. The humanities are so alive today, and they are becoming alive in new ways. Digital technologies enable us to harness the lives of the people who came before us and to connect them in ways that we here today at Stanford Connects can fully embrace and understand. Thank you.